So as Nicole said, I am Marion. I've been a crafter at Eighth Light for just over a couple of years now. I've had a whale of a time. And just a couple of things first, I can see all of you on my screen and I can see the chat as well. So if there's a problem, feel free to like wave, I can see you, and feel free to shout, scream in the chat, and I should be able to see that as well. Also, Nicole, I have you on Slack open in front of me. So if there's an extra problem, you can also contact me here. And hopefully if you can't hear me or see anything, just let me know and I should be able to see it. I've actually migrated to France as well. So the internet is excellent. Like I've got like ridiculous speed upload and download, and I'm great. So hopefully there shouldn't be any dropouts of internet tonight. The reason I wanted to give this talk is that I am a developer by trade, kind of. I've been doing this for 4 years, but I never really looked at design before. And what's been interesting is that recently I used to work on a project that had terrible design. We didn't have any design resources. We didn't have a designer. We didn't have UX. We didn't yet have UI. And every time we gave the client a new idea on how to make something slightly prettier, there was always a lot of fighting against it, because they were like, well, it's going to take a lot of time, and like it wouldn't, but we can make them understand that. And I've now moved to a project where we do have a great designer who's provided us with wireframe and a whole experience, and it's been a world of difference to see what it was like to have that resource at our disposal. The other thing is that I started a degree in software engineering at the University of Oxford, and I just today completed my first module, which was in interaction design. So I figured I might as well just sort of make sure that I understood everything correctly and also share it with others who might be interested. And so that's why I decided to do this course. So this talk. So this is a very basic 101. If you already know about design, you might get a bit bored, and I'm sorry for that. And if you've never seen design before, hopefully you will get something useful from it. So without further ado, let's dive into my talk. And so, as you probably have seen from the name, this is going to be Interaction Design 101, what to think of when adding humans to your apps. And what I would first like to tackle is a couple of things. So I mentioned that this was going to be about interaction design. An important component of it is the user experience. So we're going to look at what is the user experience and why it does matter, because sometimes you get clients like my old client that are like, no, sorry, we don't want any user experience design or anything. And you're like, well, actually, you should probably consider that. We'll dive into that in a bit. We'll also try and look at what makes the difference between a good and a bad user experience, how to make a good user experience, and then I forgot one last point, which is going to be how to make your system more user-friendly. So, hello. What is the user experience? This is a slightly tricky term to define, and it could be defined as encompassing all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. More specifically, it can refer to a person's emotion and attitude about using a particular product or system or service. It includes the practical, the experiential, the effective, the meaningful, and the valuable aspect of the human-computer interaction and product ownership. So every time you interact with a system, whether it's an app or a website or even just a physical object like a door or a smartphone, you are having a user experience. So I wanted to know if anyone could think of a memorable user experience, maybe a good one or a really bad one. If not, I can go ahead. Sorry, was there someone? What did I?
Sure, I have one, Marion.
Go for it.
My legal first name is just one letter. It's the letter E. And I run into user experience snafus and issues all the time with this. But the one that stands out to me most recently was I went to go, well, not that recently, but I guess a year ago, I went to buy a plane ticket on the Delta website. And you know, since it's a plane ticket, right, I'm required to use my legal name. You know, it has to match what's on my passport. And it was an international ticket, so I had to make very sure that it matched up with my ID. But no matter how many times I tried, I would put in my legal name, E, and it would come back and say, I forget exactly what the error message said, but it said something that felt really offensive to me. Like, your first name is invalid. Invalid name must be longer than 2 characters. And I'm kind of used to it, but every time it pops up in a new context, it always feels like a little bit of a sting.
Yeah, I can see that. I feel like this is a very Western problem as well that we implement, not thinking about other cultures and what other names can exist. I had also a pretty bad one recently. So I'm currently in France, and over the summer, I decided to make a transfer and close one of my accounts to try and open a new one. But the thing is, there's a 4-week deadline for opening a new bank account and for the transfer from the old bank account to come through. And the old bank took 6 weeks. So I have my new account got closed and my old account also got closed, and I now have 4,000 euros that are like floating in the air that I can't get back. And in order for me to get it back, I need to write a letter to my bank to ask them to send it to another bank account that I don't have yet and that I can't open because French banks are stupid and there's so many loopholes that you have to like fit into in order to open one of their bank accounts. So I'm a bit discouraged right now, and frankly I'm not going to go back and live in France again. I'll be back in the UK as soon as I can and never go back to France apart from the food.
Can I mention just a good one just to balance this out?
Yeah.
I the buying process and just the process of in general of signing up for Lemonade insurance was actually really friendly. Like the app was really nice and the flow was really easy, and it was just very seamless and easy to go through. So
that's really nice. I lost my mute button for a second. But yeah, so I'm fairly sure we've all gone through like bad and good user experiences, but let's delve into why user experience matters a little bit more. And I think if you're a developer like me, it's probably not something that you think about on a daily basis because it's either the remit of the design team or like it's not prioritized because you have so much like backend to be dealing with, like creating your databases and make sure that your microservices are talking to one another correctly, that you forget to add some styling or make it nice to use. But the thing is, and I'm sure you know that because you've experienced bad design before, is that it can have a great impact on the user that's targeted by the product that you're building. So as a user, you want a good user experience because that will set the tone for how you use similar products, whereas a bad user experience will probably make you stay away from those products, and it's probably going to be a brand that you don't recommend to others. So of course, as a product company, you do want that good user experience because you know that it will attract and it will help you retain customers, whereas the bad user experience will decrease sales, it will bring about negative reviews, and it can also increase the cost of like providing support to customers, for example, because they're always going to be calling you like, hey, why is my photocopier not working anymore? Or like, why is my printer broken? Because we all know that they break all the time. And as a company that uses products, you want a good user experience because it means that your employees can be more productive. It can also decrease the training costs associated with using that tool because they know how to use it very effectively. Whereas a bad user experience will lead to like more errors, decreased job satisfaction, and maybe even like increased employee turnover. So what makes the difference between a good and a bad user experience? And that's always a bit of a tricky one because it tends to be very subjective. But you'll often hear people say that a good user experience is going to be something that's easy, something that's straightforward, something that's delightful, whatever delightful might mean to the person and the system that they're dealing with. So you'll probably find the aesthetic of a product very pleasing. You find that it does exactly what you want it to do. Maybe you discover that it fills a need that you didn't even know you had, for example. And quickly you learn to use the product. You'll remember it easily, even if you don't use it for a long period of time. You'll trust the product itself. You will trust the possible iteration in the future. You might end up buying several versions of it over the years. You'll recommend it to your friends and family, and you're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. You should definitely buy it, which is something that I do all the time because, sometimes fans and SAD lamps are really good and people should get them. And on the other hand, a bad user experience is going to leave you upset and unhappy and frustrated. And maybe it's the fact that you encountered one too many pointless error messages and they don't tell you exactly what's wrong. Maybe it's the fact that the product that you're using is making you repeat some steps needlessly. Or maybe the design is just slightly inconvenient. You know, the button is not quite in the right place. So every time that you have to like switch on your phone, you actually press the you know, when you use an iPhone and you accidentally press the shutdown button instead of the volume. Maybe that's just because I've got small hands. Or, you know, maybe it's too complex and you don't have time to read the manual in depth. But usually it's like an accumulation of like little grating things or one big thing that it does that you wish it didn't. And eventually you'll just like never return to the product and never use it again and never recommend it to anyone. And it will be the death of this product. So how do you make a good user experience? And of course, creating a pleasant user experience is probably going to depend on what it is that you are creating. If you're creating a product that does not exist yet, at least widely, the bar is a little lower, as no one will have a frame of reference. So you can sort of like get away with anything and it's like, oh, cool, okay, excellent. However, if your product already has competition and it's something that is well known to users, you need to focus you'll need to focus a lot on what it must do well. And you'll also need to offer this like attractive, nice to have features. So in order to do that, you need to remember to create a product based not on how you want the customer to use it, but on how the customer will use it. And there's a slight difference, but as a developer, you're very likely to like think logically, okay, well, I need this button here because they're going to need to do this thing. But actually, it's very possible that the user would actually look at your app and be like, well, what does this do? I don't understand what this button is doing here. Or like, where is this piece of information that I actually really need to know about this app? So if you think about like how like humans in general, just like, well, take shortcuts, for example, think about desired paths that exist in like parks and fields where people just want to like cut corners and they can't be bothered like following the little winding road that has been created by landscapers. This is essentially what you need to implement in your app, just a desired path. So it's making it a lot easier for users to use your app. And you also have to think about the different types of users and make sure that you can tailor the experience to all of these. So for example, if you have an application that is targeted at both novices and experts, let's take Duolingo, for example. You start on Duolingo, you've never learned a language before, you'll have to like select your language and they will tailor the level for you so that you don't feel too overwhelmed by everything that you see on there. But you're after a while, say you're an expert, you've learned 10 languages, they still need to find a way to keep you engaged so that you keep using the app and you keep coming back to it and you keep giving them money. And there's a couple of interesting concepts in interaction design that are the concept of affordance and signifiers. And it's a slight tangent, but I thought it was quite interesting. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about it. An affordance is the relationship between a system or a product and a user. It's the action or the set of actions that the physical properties of a system or object allow you to do. So if you take a chair, for example, if you look at it, say you're an alien, you've never seen a chair in your life before, you're like, okay, well, what does this do? And very quickly, you're probably going to realize that, you know, if you're an alien that has legs and a butt, maybe you can sit on it and it affords you sitting. Or if you're a human and you're either quite young or quite old, you can also use the chair as somewhere to, you know, have a little rest. You hold on to it and you can either like stabilize yourself if you're a little kid that doesn't really know how to stand just yet, or, you know, you can take a breather if you're out of breath because you had to climb up the chair to grab that box of biscuits. And it also affords you to stand on it and get taller so you can get to those biscuits. In comparison, a signifier is a clue to communicate to an agent what the appropriate behavior is with something. And this is interesting because it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So if I take the example of a bookmark, for example, if the more obvious signifier of a bookmark is to allow the user to remember where they stopped in their book by being inserted between pages. Is there a question? Nope, all good. So you can see that you look at your book and you're like, okay, well, this is where my page is. But interestingly, an accidental signifier of this is also to let you know how much of your book is left. So you can you look at the side of your book and you're like, oh, okay, cool, I've read, I don't know, 3/3 of it. Well, no, 3/4 of it. And you can use a signifier to gain context about an experience. And this is very important in the context of writing websites and apps, because this is the kind of clues that your user is going to look for when using your app to make sure that they understand what your app is doing and how to use it. So ultimately, you need to sort of like discover your product affordances, and you also need to integrate the correct signifiers to make sure that the user is guided and supported through the discovery of how your app works. And if you want a few examples, Apple is well known for creating delightful user experiences, whether you use their product or not. But if you've ever used, or if you've ever bought an Apple product, I'm fairly sure you probably enjoyed the unboxing as much as the using of the product, because the experience is very smooth, it's very delightful. Every little detail has been thought through, from like the unwrapping of the actual phone from its little wrapper to, you know, opening the phone and it says hello and offers you to launch a bunch of apps. Another example, no, actually, I'm going to keep this example for later because I have it in my slides and it's quite delightful. So the next things that I would like to talk about is how to make your systems more user-friendly. There's a couple of points that I think are useful. Accessibility is one. Unfortunately, I will not be tackling that in this talk because I don't know enough about it. So maybe another 8light University for us. And I will be, on the other hand, discussing about usability heuristics. But as you know, as developers, if you're a developer, it can be quite tempting to just logically follow the steps of the acceptance criteria that you've been set, so that you know you can do the action. But you've probably not really thought about how easy it would be to do that action, or whether everything is clear, or if the error handling is done correctly. And maybe these are going to be like friction points for your users later on. And you know, a lot of poorly designed objects and systems try to coerce us to do specific things that may not be the way we want to do it, just because as developers you're like, okay, well, this is definitely how they're going to be using it, and then you're faced with a user that actually does something else completely different. It's like that old joke of the QA goes into a bar and orders a beer, and then number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. And then we also, I mean, I say we, I tend not to style things much, or at least very well, because, well, let's be honest, like styling can be tough if you haven't done much of it. And also I don't always think about the things like accessibilities and like color contrasts and things like that, because it's not been my experience and I haven't had to thought of these things. And this is definitely something that I need to improve on. But unfortunately, this is a fact of my life at the moment. But one of the worst offenders I'm sure you found is useless error messages that we don't handle very well as dev, and that as a user you have to look at. So for example, recently I was doing some online shopping and I was on like a UK store, and I got a little message saying, oh, hello, it looks like you're in undefined. Would you like to go to the undefined site? And it's like, oh, great. I guess they hadn't discovered all the countries in the world yet. And in order to try and avoid these little issues that we're all faced with as users, there has been a bunch of people that have developed heuristics to help you out with the design. And some of those usability heuristics that I'm going to discuss in this talk have been set by Jacob Nielsen. And there's 10 of them, and we're just going to look into them a little bit more, and I will provide some examples as well. So the first one, if I can click on my slide, is the visibility of a system status. So give feedback about what your system is doing to your user, let them predict easily what your system will do next to help them trust your program, add all of the spinners, you know, tell them what the next step will be. So I think in some cases, I can find a screenshot of it, but Amazon used to tell you, okay, you can proceed to the checkout, and at the next step, you can still review your order, which is good because you don't panic back out thinking, oh God, I need to pay now and I don't have my payment details ready yet. This is an example of an app that I've used for wireframing. And what I found useful with this app is that there's several signifiers of the system status. So you can see the blue bar here telling you, okay, the app is loading. And when this GIF is going to reload, you'll see there's a weird logo in the middle here that's like loading to let you know that right here, that it's loading. And here there's also a bar that's like changing colors, again, to let you know that all of this is loading. And finally, there's this little one right here that's being populated the more the bar moves on, because it's finally loaded. So just having this kind of like system status allows you to let your user know what your system is doing, so that they don't panic and think, oh, okay, I've clicked that link. Is my phone broken? Is the internet not working? When actually it's just your website not really handling this very well. Another thing is you want to match between the system and the real world. So you want to make sure that you speak your user's language. You want to keep it clear and simple. And I don't want to go back. And you want to make sure that you use those already established conventions to guide your user when they're using your system. So if you've ever had the pleasure or displeasure of working on something like a consumer-facing like banking app or insurance, or even something like cybersecurity, they find themselves to be like full of just words that just appear out of nowhere, and you're always a bit unsure as to what it is that they do. This was a screenshot of the KPMG website, and if of course if you're not part of KPMG, or if you don't deal with them on a daily basis, you might read all of this and think like, okay, what does any of this mean? So make sure that when you develop your app or your system, that it's clear for the user what it is that you are actually doing and what each step they need to take is doing. Another heuristic is user control and freedom. So you want to make sure that they can easily undo or redo their actions. And you also want to allow them to leave an unwanted action quickly and easily, so that they don't have to go through an extended process, just give up on life and uninstall your app and never see it again. So I have to deal with Lightroom when I want to process my pictures, and what it will do is that it gives you a bunch of choices here, a bunch of slider that you can like change as you want to change different aspects of your picture. And sometimes you realize that, oh, I went too far and I didn't want to do this. But instead of, resetting all of your sliders as you were, you have a bit more of a more granular history, and you can click the previous button if you want to just undo one step, or you can just get rid of all the changes that you've made on these pictures, which sometimes there can be quite a few, by pressing the reset button. And this is a good example of like allowing your user to have more control and freedom. The next point is consistency and standards. So you want to follow those existing conventions so that you don't confuse your users by doing the exact opposite of what everyone else is doing and what they're used to, so that they can more easily guess what your system does. So for example, if you are a video on demand service, a simple interface would be to put the rewind button to the left hand side of that that pause or start button, and the forward button on the right hand side. Because if you grew up with VHS recorders and then DVD recorders, it's always sort of been like that. So it makes sense for Netflix and I don't know what other, Prime Video, to use those same standards. Another fun one that you can see everywhere on the internet is volume sliders. So this is the Spotify volume sliders, which you might be familiar with. If you use a Mac, this is the touch bar sliders, and you know how they work, right? You know that if you go left, then the volume is going to be decreased. If you go right, the volume is going to be increased. But it's become quite a joke on the internet to try and create completely weird volume controls panels, where you have to like select exactly which one you want, or like you have to ask Paperclip to do that for you. And obviously these are like fun examples, but like please don't implement them in your app if you actually want people to use your app. Another point is error prevention. And of course you can either eliminate error-prone conditions, but good luck with that, because we're not, magicians and we don't always know what the errors are going to be. Or you can check for them and present the user with a confirmation option before they commit to an action, for example. So say you're about to delete an entire database, you might want to double check that you should or shouldn't be doing this. Think about GitHub asking you if you really want to delete that repository and making you type the name of the repository again before you do that. This is the kind of error prevention that you can do. And there's two things in error prevention. You can either, if you're a user, you might have a slip or you might make a mistake. And a slip occurs when a person plans to do one thing, but then inadvertently does something else. Whereas a mistake occurs when a person plans to do the wrong thing and is successful doing it. So if you think about the video on demand service, this is the BBC iPlayer, which is the BBC's a bunch of channels, and the iPlayer is just the online video on demand service that they offer. And if you want to talk about a slip, for example, you could be watching the match of the day World Cup, and you come back to this and, you know, I don't know, you're maybe coming back from your nap or whatever, so you're still a little bit tired. And instead of pressing this play button right here, you're accidentally going to press the restart program simply because it's bigger, it's larger, it's above it, and it's like your eyes are being caught by it. You're like, oh, okay, cool, I'm just going to play it, and you press restart program and all your progress is lost. Whereas this could have been put on the left of it, and this would have been a lot easier to deal with. A mistake, for example, on the other hand, would be to, instead of deleting everything that's in your trash, just accidentally deleting everything that's on your computer, as demonstrated by this example. Please don't use this command, just don't. The next step would be to make sure that you use recognition rather than recall. And I don't have an example for that because this is a bit more theoretical, but essentially recalling information requires considerably more cognitive effort than recognizing it. So if you think about it in practice, it's going to be easier for people to answer the question, is the meaning of life 42, rather than what is the meaning of life? Or if you want a simpler question, is the capital of Portugal Lisbon, rather than what is the capital of Portugal? And this is probably why most of us preferred multiple choice questions at school. So when you are creating your app or your website or digital system, you want to make sure that the elements that the user has to interact with are visible and are easily retrievable. And so offering help in context through, for example, a step-by-step tutorial when first using a game or an application is probably easier than reading a manual or a whole page explaining how something works. After that, we can look at the flexibility and the efficiency of use. And what this means is that you allow frequent users to operate your system more quickly and efficiently through things like shortcuts or customizable menus, or anything that will speed them up and allow for a smoother and better user experience. On the other hand, you should also keep your system flexible so that processes can be carried out in different ways, which will also give your user a better experience. So if you've ever used Vim, for example, you probably know that you can do similar actions with completely different commands. That is an example of efficiency of use. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it is flexible. If I look at applications, this is Monzo. Monzo is a challenger bank here in the UK, and they have a very delightful app that has shaken the world of banking in the UK, so that most main banks have had to up their app game. And an example of flexibility here is that it allows you two different sort of views. So on the left hand side, I can see all of my little, nope, not that. Oh no. No, I'm going back now. Yay, I'm back. Okay, so you can see that I have all of these different little pots. So my pots are actually just, it's all the same money because it's just one bank account, but they give you pots so that you can split that money into different parts and make sure that it's allocated to the right thing. So as you can see, I love keyboards, so sometimes I try to save money from keyboards, but not this month. In any case, this is one way to look at all my pots. Another way is the display on the right, where you will actually have to slide one by one to see all of your pots, and it will give you a little more details about each pot. And other examples of flexibility would be the widget menu in iOS 14, I think, that allows you to customize this a little bit more by adding the applications that you want or that you use the most. And if you've ever used Citymapper, it also gives you the option to add all of your addresses so that you can quickly select one when you use the application, so that you don't have to like keep entering your postcode and your address every time that you need to use it. Afterwards, we're going to move on to the aesthetic and minimalist design. This is a bit of, well, it can be a bit of a controversial one, but essentially what they really mean here is do not display information that's either irrelevant or that's rarely needed. Keep the essentials, make sure the rest is easily accessible, but make it so that users are not distracted and can still access whatever information they need easily. So if I take the case of Monzo again, because it's a very well-designed app, this is, say, my main account, which, as you can see, I'm going to eat noodles for the rest of the month. They display some information like the transactions that you've had recently. You can see a number of things like, oh crap, I've lost my card, I need to freeze it, I need to add money to my bank account, these kind of things. But then there's some information that you don't necessarily want to see because it can be quite a lot and it can be overwhelming. So they've hidden it away. And this little pie chart here is the budget tab. And this is what it looks, nope, come back. This is what it looks like. So it gives you how much you've got left to spend, although it's always a bit worrying because it's like, oh, it looks like you could run out of money. And it's just because I manage my money differently and I don't put everything in one pot for the whole month. But then afterwards, it gives you your spending broken down by categories so that you know exactly what you've spent where, which I thought was always very useful. And it also means that you don't have that information. The information is readily available, but it's not in your face all the time, which could be very overwhelming because I don't need to know any of these things at all times. Following that, you can also help your users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. This is a very important step because you want to make sure that your error messages are clear, that they're visible, and they also suggest a solution so that your user doesn't feel trapped and ends up giving up. So, you know, make sure that you use the traditional markers of an error message. So like bold and red, for example, is usually a clear indicator that there is a problem somewhere. Allow them to backtrack by pressing like a back button or a cancel or a cross, you know, to give them a shortcut so that they can solve the error immediately, as long as it's feasible. And also, yeah, make sure that there's like, I don't know, an OK button to make sure the error goes away, or tell them exactly where the problem is. So recently I had to fill in a form. This was actually my university course evaluation form. And I noticed that like, if I forgot to input one question, I got a lovely error message that tells me, oh, one question needs to be completed before you go to the next page, and that's question 11. So indeed that is question 11, which is highlighted in red, and it says this question is required. So this is very helpful because it's like, oh, okay, I know exactly where the problem is and I know what I need to do to solve it. I need to answer this. Finally, one last point I have is to help and document your app as much as you can. So obviously the less documentation you need to read, the better. However, in case where the system might be a little bit more complex and you do need to provide that information, make sure that there is documentation to help them understand why or how they should carry out those actions. So if I take the example of this app, for example, which is something that I just had to like create out of nowhere. This is a system that requires you to upload a proof of identity. And obviously you start with an app and it requires that. And you're like, whoa, okay, I don't want to give you my data, you know, like, I don't think you need that. So it's always helpful to let them know why it is that you want to have this data. In this case, it's like, oh, we want to ensure your safety and make sure that, you know, you can be held accountable in case you do something really bad. And the documentation of this part as well is also, here's the list of valid proof of identity that you can give us. And this kind of concludes the heuristic that I had for you tonight. If you want to learn more about them, you can go to this website, which I will paste in the chat in a while. And you can also enjoy these lovely examples of terrible design that I hope you've not had to face recently. And if you have any questions, please feel free, now is the time.
Those are good. Those are good examples.
Well, I have a comment. I sincerely hope that there are some developers of banking websites in here paying attention to what you're talking about, because most people want to go to their bank website, download their statement, maybe their transactions, and then you know get in and get out. They don't want to be led around hundreds of pages. Or for a credit card, log in, get my statement, get my transactions, make a payment, and leave. Why isn't that always on one page? So this is good stuff.
I know this is going to be a slight plug, but I know Monzo is trying to expand to the US, and I'm hoping that it does the same as it did in the UK, where it forces all the main banks to just like up their game, because the apps, the banking apps that we had in the UK used to be absolutely terrible. You couldn't do anything; they were completely useless, unreliable. And since Monzo has started, like there's been such a good increase of like care that's been taken by banks, and now they're all usable and great. So I hope that it does come to the US if that's where you're based. If not, then get Monzo in the UK.
Thank you, Marion, for a great talk. I really enjoyed it. Mostly all of those things that you have mentioned, it really spoke a lot of sense to me, because I already agree with that. And sometimes I have trouble to talk to my colleagues in the team, repeating all these things that you mentioned, like the error messages should tell exactly where the problem is, and all the other stuff. I just wanted to ask, like, do you have some kind of social media that you use? Of course, I hope it's not an invasion of privacy, like knowing your background.
No, absolutely not.
Mhm.
This little handle here is my Twitter handle, and this is where you will find me on social media if there is an account linked to them. So you can use that. And here's my email if you want to ask me more questions, or if you want me to give more social media.
Wow, thank you very much. You just answered. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, like another question, like if other people don't have it yet, like how does it go for you explaining that stuff? You just taught us about well, the basics. Interaction is really important, because computers and software are taking so much time from our like human life, and it's important not to have any errors. Do you find sometimes it to be difficult to get the point across?
As a designer or as a programmer? Because I'm not a designer.
I think as a programmer is a bit more difficult, because some could be a bit more arrogant, I guess.
Yeah, so in my current project it's fine, because we do actually have a design resource, and she's a great designer, and she's the client has been very understanding about our design needs. On my old project, however, we had this big problem where, as I mentioned, they just didn't believe in design or front end or styling or anything, so the app looked terrible. And at some point they asked us to write a little greenfield app, and we just went to town, making sure that it was nice, it was lovely, it used the right kind of design that we're all used to with our tables and our buttons and things like that. And what was fascinating was that when the users got to play with it, they were like, oh my God, the design is lovely. And I think that really made an impression on the project manager and the VP of engineering, who were like, oh, wait a second, why did we not do that before? So when we went back to our main app and we were like, hey, can we do this and add a new button? Or even just like do it on the sly and just not tell them we did that and see if they noticed it, they were a lot more open to it. So I think this is also another tactic that maybe you can use if you're having problems with your team, is maybe just like sneak the little features in one by one, little by little, so that they're like, ooh, that's a fancy button you've added.
I've definitely done that before.
I heard you make a reference to Vim, as in Vim the editor.
Yes.
Is that one of your go-tos?
It was for 18 months. The project I'm currently on now uses IntelliJ, but I do still go to Vim every now and then because I'm so used to it now.
It rules. Thanks.
I agree. I still use the Vim bindings everywhere I can go now. It's like, oh, IntelliJ, yeah, but make it Vim.
Yeah, you know you've been using it too long when your fingers know how to do stuff that your brain can't explain.
Yep. Is there any more questions? If not, I suppose we can set everyone free, Nicole.
Yep. Thank you, Marion, and thank you everybody for coming. I just want to give one quick plug out to our blog, eighthlight.com/blog, where we have a lot of really great articles and posts about a variety of different things. So thank you again, everybody, for showing up and for coming. And I hope to see you on the 4th for Francesca's meetup. It's going to be again at 2:30 on Friday the 4th. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Bye. Nicole, thank you so much for organizing. I very much appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to give this talk as well. So if you ever need anyone for 8th like you again, please let me know. I'd be glad to help again.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, in fact, if you ever have any idea that for a talk that you want to give, the stage is always open to 8th Light people, especially. So, if you want to do all of your classes.
I may very well do. I've got some more coming up. There's one about security principle, and there's going to be one about algorithms and others. So I'm definitely use that to help me learn.
Yeah, that's perfect. Did you sign up to give a mini conf talk?
Not yet. I've been out for 2 weeks, so I haven't